She grew up in a country that had never produced a top 100 tennis player, in a sport most of her countrymen barely watched. 8 years later, at 20 years old, she walked off a court in Miami having just beaten the second best player on the planet, and a basketball-obsessed nation of 110 million people suddenly could not look away. This is how Alex Eala was built, and why almost no one should have been able to do it. Before you can understand that match in Miami, you need to understand what she walked onto the court carrying. Not a game plan, a country's entire tennis silence, and a sport it had never once believed in. The Philippines is a basketball nation, not as a preference, not as a passing trend, but as something close to a cultural law. Every barangay, every schoolyard, every neighborhood across 7,641 islands has a hoop before it has anything else. The Philippine Basketball Association was founded in 1975, one of the oldest professional leagues in Asia. The NBA broadcasts in Philippine primetime. A Filipino child can name 20 NBA stars before they name a single tennis player. You need to understand this. Tennis in the Philippines is not a street sport. It is a club sport, a membership sport, a sport for the children of Manila's executives and diplomats. For most Filipinos, it barely exists. Before Alex Eala, no Filipino had ever reached the WTA Top 100. Not one. In the entire history of professional women's tennis, a country of more than 100 million people had never placed a single player inside that line. To build a professional tennis player, you need courts. Not just one court, but a network of them, maintained, lit, available to children who do not yet know they are exceptional. The Philippines barely has this. In a country where a single typhoon can flatten the neighborhood, where infrastructure investment is stretched across thousands of islands, you do not build professional tennis facilities first. You build roads, seawalls, shelters. The coaching pipeline that produces champions, from grassroots clubs to national federations to high-performance centers, requires decades of sustained investment to build. You will not find that pipeline in Philippine tennis. Not yet. Compare this to Spain, where Eala would eventually train. Spain has produced more top 50 players than most continents. Clay courts in every province, a national federation with full-time coaches, and a culture that treats excellence as an obligation. The Philippine Tennis Association has operated for decades on resources most national bodies would call inadequate for even a basic development program. No funded national training center, no full-time high-performance director, almost no pathway. Tennis is, at its foundation, an expensive sport to develop. Equipment, coaching, court time, and international travel for a junior player can cost a family tens of thousands of dollars annually before a single ranking point is earned. There is no WTA or ATP event hosted in the Philippines. No home soil where a Filipino junior can earn international ranking points close to home. Every point requires an international flight, a visa, an entry fee. The Philippine Olympic Committee has historically channeled its limited sports budget toward disciplines where medals are achievable. Boxing, weightlifting, shooting. Tennis has never been that kind of strategic priority. The medal math does not favor it. Researchers who study athletic development call this the talent identification problem. When no system exists to surface gifted children systematically, the few who do emerge are almost always the product of a single accidental discovery. The structural math is ruthless. Fewer courts mean fewer players. Fewer players mean fewer coaches. Fewer coaches mean fewer pathways. Each gap multiplies the next, and the probability of producing a professional champion drops towards something close to zero. To reach the WTA Top 100, requires roughly a decade of high-volume, high-quality practice. Opponents who push your limits, coaches who can identify and fix technical flaws, and financial support to sustain all of it. None of that institutional infrastructure existed in the Philippines for Alex Eala. What existed instead was a father who had played tennis himself, who saw something in his young daughter before she was old enough to name what it was. Between a gifted child in Manila and a seat at one of the world's elite training academies, there is a gap so wide that most families in most countries never find a way across it. The Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, is where the world's most promising juniors train under the philosophy that produced 14 French Open titles. It is selective, it is elite, and it is on a different continent. Getting there requires more than talent. It requires visibility, timing, and someone in the right room at the right moment willing to look past a passport that had never once produced a player worth betting on. What Eala assembled, piece by piece, was what researchers of outlier achievement call invisible infrastructure, the network of individuals who replaced the institutions that did not exist, the system she built by herself. Every data point in the Philippines' tennis history says this player should not exist, not because the talent was never there, but because the conditions required to convert talent into a professional ranking rarely were. And you need to sit with what this means. In a country where basketball is culture, where infrastructure follows basketball and funding follows infrastructure, choosing tennis is not just uncommon. It is an act of near isolation. So when you see her at Miami, stepping onto that hard court against the world number 2, you are not watching a product of a system. You are watching proof that one person can become the system herself. She is not just playing for herself on that court in Miami. She is playing for every Filipino child who ever picked up a racket in a country that gave them nowhere to take it. But here is what none of those children watching from Manila know. The decision that put Alex Eala on a plane to Spain, that changed the entire trajectory of her life, almost never happened at all. Here is what almost stopped everything. Michael Eala ran the numbers one more time, and the numbers had not improved. What changed was not the arithmetic. What changed was the question the family was willing to ask. The Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, Mallorca opened in 2006. What you are looking at, when you see it from above, is not a tennis club. It is a total argument about what a professional player requires. It is residential, relentless, built on the belief that every hour outside the system is an hour your competitor is gaining. Rafael Nadal was not simply the product of talent. He was the product of this exact philosophy. To enroll your child there, you are committing to fees that, between tuition, boarding, and full-time coaching, would take a comfortable Filipino professional several years of careful saving just to fund a single year. And that figure assumes she stays, assumes she does not break from homesickness in the second winter when the novelty is gone and the parents are more than 12,000 kilometers away. Alex Eala was 13. You need to hold that number. Not talented for her age, not promising by regional standards. By any serious accounting, she was the best junior player in a country of 100 million people. She had won everything available to her at home. Not because the competition was weak, it was not, but because she had simply climbed to the ceiling. And the ceiling in Manila was too low. No Filipino woman had ever been ranked inside the WTA top 100. Not one in the entire history of the professional tour. You can sit with that for a moment. It is not a small fact. Tennis in the Philippines existed at the edges of elite private life. A few hundred courts for 100 million people. Club memberships priced above the median monthly wage. The talent pool was, by design, very small. Michael Eala was not naive about this. He had built a business. He understood the difference between a calculated risk and a wish. And what his daughter's coaches were describing to him looked, at first, like the latter. The academy had identified Alex through regional competition, through the scattered network of scouts who moved through Southeast Asia looking for exactly this kind of outlier. She had been found. That was the easy part. Being found and being ready are not the same thing. At 13, you are not ready for Mallorca, not the food, the language, the separation, the daily fact of being the foreign one who must earn every ease. Alex Eala, Alex's mother, has spoken about the early calls home, the silences inside those calls. A child learning the discipline of not crying until after the phone is down, because to cry would worry everyone. What made the bet slightly less impossible was Nike. The company signed Eala before she turned 15, among the earliest endorsement commitments the brand had made to a Southeast Asian tennis player. The financial geometry shifted. Sponsorship does not replace presence. It does not sit in the stands at a junior match in Mallorca. That presence was always going to be an ocean away, a phone call at an awkward hour, a voice without a face. There is a Filipino concept you need to know, utang na loob, a debt of gratitude so deep it becomes moral weight. From the moment she boarded that plane, Alex Eala was already carrying it. Every month her mother counted without her daughter in the house translated into obligation. Not the crushing kind, the clarifying kind. She knew exactly what had been given up and exactly why it could not be wasted. At the academy, she was not the best. That was precisely the point. She was surrounded by teenagers from Spain, France, Argentina, children who had grown up inside the culture of the tour. She had to start again. The language barrier was real and specific. The tactical vocabulary of clay court tennis, the coaching shorthand, the grammar of how you discuss a match with a Spanish coach, none of it existed in Tagalog. And then there was Tony Na, DAHL. The man who built Rafael Na DHL from a teenager into the most decorated clay court player in the history of tennis. A coach who does not offer comfort as a teaching method. Tony Na DAHL has described watching Eala for the first time. He said she had something you cannot teach, the ability to construct a point rather than merely react to one. He was not flattering her, he was diagnosing her. Tony Na DAHL had spent decades learning that seeing extraordinary talent is the easy part. Building the professional, the one who holds that talent under the pressure of a Grand Slam third round, is a different project entirely. The academy's system was total. Sleep schedules, nutrition, physical conditioning, mental training, tactical periodization. Her body was being rebuilt. The junior player who landed in Mallorca would not be the one who eventually left it. Other Filipino families watched from Manila. Some had daughters with genuine talent, children who had pushed Alex in domestic competition. None of them made the same move. The barrier was not only money. The barrier was also an admission that your country's system could not finish the job, that the infrastructure, the culture, the coaching depth were not enough to complete what they had started in a child. Alex Eala would spend 5 years inside that system before she turned professional. The family's bet paid off. But what the academy gave her, it also wanted something back for. And that is where the next question begins. So the bet was made. A teenager, an academy in Mallorca, a family an ocean away. Now it had to produce something. And in 2022, it did. At the 2022 US Open, Alex Eala won the girls' singles title. Not a round, not a breakthrough loss, the whole thing. The junior champion of a Grand Slam. She was the first Filipino in history to win a junior Grand Slam in singles. A country that had never placed a woman in the senior top 100 suddenly had a junior world champion. Back home, it detonated. Headlines, morning shows, politicians posing for photos. For a moment, it looked like the story was already won. But here is the part the celebration did not mention. A junior Grand Slam title is one of the most misleading trophies in sport. Look at the history. The list of junior Grand Slam champions is crowded with names that never won a single senior title. Most never crack the world's top 50 as adults. The junior game rewards talent and nerve. The professional game is a different sport entirely, played by grown women who are stronger, faster, and have been doing this for a living for 10 years. The gap between those two worlds is where almost every prodigy disappears. The trophy does not carry you across it. It just tells you that you are allowed to try. So at 17, Alex Eala was not a star. She was a junior champion holding a ticket to the hardest crossing in tennis, with no guarantee she would reach the other side. And for the next 2 years, the crossing nearly swallowed her. There are no highlight reels for what came next. No primetime matches, no roaring crowds, just the part of tennis that the cameras never find. It is called the ITF circuit, the minor leagues of professional tennis. Tournaments in small towns for prize money that would embarrass a club player in front of almost no one. This is where ranking points are mined, one brutal week at a time. Win 5 matches in a place no one has heard of, and your ranking might climb a few spots. Lose early, and the week was a loss in every sense. Through 2023, Alex Eala's rankings stalled. She climbed to around 143rd in the world, and then the climb just stopped. And now the part nobody likes to say out loud. The economics of women's professional tennis are savage. By most estimates, only the top 100 or so players on the planet actually make money from the sport. Everyone below that line is, in effect, paying to compete. Flights, hotels, a coach if you can afford one, a physio if you are lucky. The further down the rankings you sit, the more of it comes out of your own pocket. Most players who reach this point quietly run out of road, not because they lack talent, but because the money runs out before the ranking goes up. This is the dip, the unglamorous, unfilmed stretch where the prodigy either breaks through or simply fades, and the country that celebrated the junior trophy slowly forgets. Alex Eala did not fade. She kept paying the price, week after anonymous week, building something that would not show up on a ranking sheet until the exact moment it mattered most. The debt the Academy collected was not financial, it was philosophical. When you spend 5 years learning to construct a point from the baseline up, patience becomes your first weapon and your last. Miami, March 2025. Hard courts, humidity, a draw populated by champions. And somewhere in the bottom half, a name that most broadcast analysts had to look up. Alex Eala came in as a wildcard, ranked outside the top 100. In WTA terms, that means you are expected to lose early and lose quietly and make no noise doing it. First came Jelena Ostapenko, the Latvian who won Roland Garros by hitting through opponents rather than past them, a player whose power makes even top 10 seeds nervous from the opening game. What Eala did against Ostapenko should have sent a signal to the rest of the draw. She did not defend. She met power with redirection, absorbing pace and changing its direction before Ostapenko could reset. The Nadal system teaches you to hit upward, to load topspin, to make the ball rise after the bounce. Against a flat striker like Ostapenko, that spin becomes a weapon the hitter cannot time. Then came Madison Keys, the Australian Open champion, a woman who had defeated Aryna Sabalenka 2 months earlier in Melbourne. Keys was not in a slump. Keys was playing some of the best tennis of her life. You might expect a wildcard to tighten up here, to feel the weight of the occasion, the crowd pulling for the American, the scoreboard doing what scoreboards do when a third set begins to close. Eala's game does something unusual under pressure. It does not simplify. Shot selection becomes more precise, not less. She was built inside a system designed to play the high leverage point differently from the low stakes one. Her serve, built for placement rather than pace, was landing in corners that forced Keys off her strike zone. When Keys could not dictate from the first ball, the rallies went to the player who could build longer. 2 matches in, both against major champions. A wildcard ranked outside the top 100 had not broken a sweat. The draw noticed. The commentators noticed. Iga Swiatek was next. Swiatek at this point had won 5 Grand Slams and spent years at the very summit of the ranking. She was not in a position to be surprised by a wild card. She had, genuinely, seen everything. Her game runs on a forehand that functions like a grinding wheel. She positions you exactly where she wants you, wide to the deuce side, then closes the door with the inside-out winner you cannot reach. In the first set, Eala studied. She was not playing for the set. She was gathering information, how SHFON tech loads before the heavy ball, which side she prefers under pressure, where the second serve lands when it matters. What she found, SHFON tech's second serve, when she was moved wide before delivery, drifted toward the middle. A ball that should be an advantage became a pattern, and Eala had a forehand built for that zone. Point by point in the second set, Eala began to return from a position wider than SHFON tech expected. She was inviting the wide serve. She wanted to be there. The angle she could generate was extraordinary. The crowd, which had come to Miami to watch SHFON tech advance, went quiet in a way that happens only when something genuinely new is on the court. Not quiet from disappointment, quiet from recognition. Eala was playing the exchange before the exchange. Where SHFON tech projected 2 balls ahead, Eala projected 4. The Academy trains exactly this sequence, not the next shot, but the shape of the whole point. In the third set, you could see SHFON tech reach for an adjustment she did not have. Her usual response to adversity is to hit harder. Eala had designed the court geometry to make harder the wrong answer. When the last point fell, the highest-ranked player in the Philippines had beaten the number 2 player in the world, the first Filipino in history to defeat a top 5 player, a sentence containing at least 3 improbabilities. No Filipino had ever reached a WTA 1000 semi-final. The path to this moment defied the infrastructure typically required to produce a player of this level. Something about the route had been genuinely unusual from the very start. Rankings are a record of what already happened. They count titles and points accumulated over the previous 12 months. They cannot count 1,000 hours learning to construct a point before the point begins. Against 3 different styles, a flat power hitter, a hard-court champion fresh off the Australian Open, and the grinding world number 2, Eala, applied one principle. She played the point before her opponent knew it had started. There is no ranking metric for the patience built over 5 years in Spain. No points allocation for learning to see the court differently, which is exactly how a wildcard ends up in a WTA 1000 semi-final. She would lose in the semi-final. The run ended. But you cannot unsee what she did to SHFON tech on a hard court in March. And someone had to ask the question, where exactly did this come from? The Academy built this player. The Philippines claimed her. And those 2 institutions now want very different things from the same athlete, at exactly the moment when her career is about to accelerate. A single great week can be called a fluke. Tennis is littered with players who caught fire once and were never seen again. The only answer to that doubt is to do it again. So she did it again. Through late 2025 and into 2026, Alex Eala stopped being a wildcard story and started being a fixture, semi-final after semi-final, on the sport's biggest stages. On the 16th of March 2026, she reached a career-high ranking of number 29 in the world, the highest any Filipino, man or woman, has ever climbed. Then, on the grass of Berlin, she made the point unarguable. She beat Elena Rybak, a Wimbledon champion. She beat Elina Svitolina, 2 top 10 players in a single tournament. Look at what changed. The serve that used to break down under pressure had become a weapon. The body that used to tire had been built to last 3 brutal sets. But the deepest change was not physical. She had stopped playing like someone hoping to belong and started playing like someone who already did. And this is where the ranking becomes the least interesting part of the story. Because Alex Eala did not just climb a ladder, she built one where none had existed. A Filipino child watching her does not have to imagine the impossible anymore. The path is no longer theoretical. It has a name, a face, and a number next to it. That is the thing a first leaves behind. Not a trophy, but a door, propped open for everyone who comes after. Wimbledon is ahead. More chapters will be written, some of them losses. But the hardest thing she will ever do is already done. She proved it could be done at all. If this brought the match back to you, subscribe for the next one.